Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have Vincent on the Emotional Mastery podcast here to talk about acupuncture, emotions, healing, all of the things. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Thank you for joining us. I always just start with, I'll have you introduce yourself and just let everybody know, as much or as little as you would like about, your story, your history, kind of anything pivotal that's gotten you to where you are today.
Okay, wow. Firstly, I want to thank you. It's really exciting to have the space to express and to talk and to converse, like all the things. I think one of the most important things is story sharing. And so firstly, I really want to thank you. So I'm Vincent VanOhm. That's my healer name. Most people in my hometown called me the Urban Witch. And that, we can get into that later, but I'm known for being an acupuncturist in a large city that did things very differently than most other acupuncturists did. Sometimes my partner refers to us as renegades, where we literally, when everybody's going right, we'll go left. And that's really what I started doing in that hometown of mine. And that's kind of it's built up into something so much bigger, where we talk a lot about emotional health and the implications of what happens when you don't feel your emotions, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does acupuncture heal? Like, how did you get into that? Where did that begin? And how did it kind of like transform into what you do now?
Yeah, acupuncture it's a cool story how I got involved in that. So I was about like 19 or 20. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know acupuncture existed. And I was working at a golf course while I was doing my undergrad. And it's hilarious because my undergrad is in French literature, which is like completely different than anything else. And so I was doing my undergrad, I was working at this golf course to make some money, and I hurt my arms really bad. And I developed severe tendonitis. And I didn't tell anybody until it was like way too late. So I couldn't even like put a shirt on. It was so bad. And so I go to this physio, and this physio is like, "You're not responding to any of the treatment. I'm going to try acupuncture." And I was like, "What is this? I don't even know what that is." And so she starts putting needles in my arms. And the next morning I woke up and it was like I had my life back. And I'm like, "What is this magic?" So I go back to university, I finished my undergrad, but I never forgot about this seemingly magical way of healing. And so I started exploring programs in the area. And I just asked one of my friends, I was like, "Can you go to this open house with me? I'm too scared to go by myself." And I went to the open house and they were talking about acupuncture. And I was just like, I have to do this. And there was always a joke in that acupuncture school. It's like when you go in, you're not the same person as you come out, because you learn all of the esoterics and all this healing capacity, and you just become a completely different person. So that was how I got into acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, like everything, acupuncture in itself is just, I got to give so much credit to it because it is such an incredible, intricate, deep, dynamic, mysterious. There's so much to it, and it can take an entire lifetime to learn the ins and outs of it. And it wasn't until, partway through my career that I started to really look at emotions and how that intertwined within a Chinese medicine and acupuncture field. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so how does that present itself? And like because I know we spoke last time, like offline, about, incorporating emotions in there and how it's not necessarily something that's like always taught or looked at, even going to like Western doctors, right? Like, I feel like nobody's like, "Oh, hey, how was your childhood?" or "What kind of trauma do you have?" Right. It's just very prescriptive. Like, I'm just going to give you this. And then if that doesn't work, I'll mask it with this. And, so I think obviously, this is the Emotional Mastery podcast. So emotions are just huge. So I'm just so fascinated and interested, having that added detail, right? Like actually working through the emotions, because I'm going to have a whole bunch of questions on that. But, how does that work with acupuncture? Like, how does that look in your sessions that you pull these emotions out?
Yeah. Awesome question. So something just on a very basic level that I would like to share is the way that we'll go with like anger, sadness, and fear. We'll just take those emotions because they're pretty common, right? The way that those affect the body from an acupuncture perspective is they can create kind of internal systems. So anger is talked about creating, if it's not expressed, then it'll go inward.
Mm-hmm.
And when an emotion goes inward, what it can do is it can create symptomology based on, we'll call them elements. Okay. So if anger isn't expressed outward, it goes inward and it creates like a tornado inside of you. So what we call it is it creates wind. Now,
Mm.
when wind is trapped inside the body, what it'll present like from a symptomatic point of view is like tension, dizziness. It's kind of like if you really think about standing in a windstorm, what does your body naturally do? It wants to tense up and it wants to like curl inwards. Some people will stand open and let the wind move through them, but it's pretty common. Most people want to get away from it. And
Mhm.
so if you can think about that from an emotional standpoint, if you're not willing to express that anger and it keeps going inward, most people are going to have a ton of like almost always cardinal will be neck and shoulder tension. The next from there is like hips and low back. Those are, for the most part, cardinal signs that anger is not being expressed. Something like fear, for example, will always hide in the low back. And so you can use it diagnostically in a simple way in regards to acupuncture. So what acupuncture will do is it'll access those channels and open them up so they're not blocked anymore by that emotion. But what a lot of practitioners won't do, and you'll see this in Western medicine too, is they won't take an emotional history.
Mm.
They'll always take a physical history. How has your health been? But they won't often talk about the mind because it's been so separated. So it's like the only way you can access talking about emotions is if you go into like a therapy model, for example. And so that was where it seemed really limited in acupuncture. You'll get some people talking about, okay, there's major anger, there's major fear, there's major worry. Worry is another one that can create a lot of internal, we call it dampness. And when you see dampness, you'll see digestive issues. It'll literally feel like think about a campfire. Okay. Most people have had a campfire of one way or another. When the wood is really dry, the fire is really robust.
Mhm.
But when the wood is wet, it creates a lot of smoke and it just can't really take off. And these are cardinal signs of worry. It's where it's the difference between you feeling fully expansive in yourself or like really like low and you want to sleep all the time and your digestive's like, what are my capacities in regards to language? Like, can I swear?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So
Yeah.
when you're like really worried and it like gets like inwards and inwards, you just feel like really fucking tired and slow and you just like don't want to do anything and you're uninspired. And so from an emotional perspective, most people don't know that their emotions are actually creating a really messy internal environment in their organs, in their digestion, in their clarity, in their inspiration. So Chinese medicine will talk about, if you haven't expressed all of your anger, it'll really put a lot of pressure in certain areas and therefore you won't feel the inspiration because you're too busy being angry. And so it becomes really important to not only acknowledge the fact that our emotions are really inhibiting us from actually being everything that we are, but also the fact that it's usually cardinal moments that are creating that in the first place. And so a lot of this isn't fully talked about in Eastern medicine or Chinese medicine, but you also have to realize that our Western culture is so different from an Eastern culture for
Mhm.
so many different reasons. That's like a whole topic I could spend a lot of time talking about. So that's kind of where I'm coming from an acupuncture perspective is it'll work. Sometimes it'll work really long term, but what I've noticed in my private practice where I am in the West, that it really, really, really is important for people to be feeling what is going on in their internal self that they were never willing to feel before at
Mm.
like ages 0 to 7, for example.
Mhm. And so when you have these sessions, you pinpoint these emotions and then you use acupuncture to literally like the needles go into these specific points and kind of allow it to release.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different styles of acupuncture. There's like 5 element acupuncture, which when I was talking about like wind, for example,
Mhm.
you can use elements to move things through the body, but there's also esoteric acupunctures, which is very spiritual. So when you start using these different types of acupuncture, when you bring acknowledgement to a person about a specific moment in their life, and then you put needles in an area to completely pop it all open, it's literally like someone has flicked on the lights inside your body and inside your mind. And I found that when I thought for a minute, maybe I'm an anomaly. Like maybe I'm just like a weird person in the city that can do all these things. And what I have found though is that when I taught other people, it was duplicatable like it was so consistent over and over and over and over again that if you applied acupuncture or even massage therapy or osteopathy, like there's other modalities that you can pair all this with, But if you were able to do that while acknowledging these moments, people's lives would transform in like 90 minutes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah. Cause I
Mm-hmm.
think like I mean, I know I went through years of therapy, like EMDR therapy to like deal with my emotions. And I'm still like in that process of, I've come so far from where I was, but, I mean, when you've stored your emotions for 30 years and not dealt with them, to be able to like heal that so quickly almost sounds like overwhelming, but also so empowering at the same time. Can you speak to like the areas? I know you had mentioned like where you find anger in your body, but are there any specific areas that you find like things are trapped, like whether it's the heart or I know the hips, like we store a lot of trauma in our hips. But just, if there's anything that you've really noticed like consistently where it's stored.
Consistently? Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that a lot of, okay, we'll go with jaw first, like TMJ. These
Mm-hmm.
ones or people holding tons of tension in their jaw and they wear a lot of like what's it called, a night guard.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm like, what have you been unwilling to say? Either you're pissed, you're resentful, you're afraid, like worried. What are you unwilling to actually vocalize? And what is causing your body to clamp down? Like who made it really unsafe for you to say something? And so I find that almost always in the jaw. Headaches and migraines, I'm going to say 95% of the time, maybe even more, is pressure. You're under so much pressure about who you're supposed to be, what you have to be doing. And this is usually societal that's placed that. And it varies for cultures as to what it is specifically, but that's like, what did your parents say that you had to do about grades or school or jobs? And that pressure comes down on you. Anxiety is really interesting. That one can sit in the chest, but that one can also sit in the stomach, but that can also sit in the forehead. So the interesting thing is people's emotions can move and change depending on what area of the body it is. But for the most part, like I said, like jaw is usually like anger and resentment. Like people are just
Mm-hmm.
so fucking pissed and they won't say it. Right. And they'll just like hold it in there and it'll get worse and worse and worse. Guilt will usually sit in the shoulder, predominantly the right shoulder. And again, like they can change to case dependent and also story dependent. We're so crafty as human beings about where we pack things down
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again.
Yeah. You mentioned TMJ and that just like literally I felt that so much because I used to get like what I thought was like these really bad ear infections. It would hurt so bad. And I went to the doctor and they were like, it's TMJ. Like I don't wear a night guard or anything. But like you said, like an inability to express yourself or feel safe, like that has been like the story of my life. Like all, my astrology and my human design and all these things like really point towards me being able to express myself. And even just since having the podcast, it has helped so much because this is a space literally where I'm coming here to talk and have conversations and express and like, heal myself and heal others. So it's been like so healing in that. I have not had like it hasn't been as bad as it used to be, but like literally, like you said that I just felt that so much because it's just, it is so true. Like just that inability to express, and it's like these areas that you're talking about, it's almost like it makes sense, right? It's not like, we have to like dig to like figure out the like, like it's like almost obvious in a way, that but we always want to apply so many more meanings to it or like, it's just not like, it's not explained to us in that way, right? We don't go to the doctor and it's like, well, what stress do you have? Because this is hurting, I think it's just such a beautiful thing. I study Ayurveda. And so a lot of it is, I love Ayurveda because it is mind, body, and soul, right? Like we can't heal one without healing the other. And yoga specifically is all about controlling your mind, because our mind is just like, it's like the hardest
Oh
thing
my
to like
gosh.
get under control.
It's so true. Like I remember when we were talking off this and you were
Mm-hmm.
like, do you know what all aspects of course I went and dug deeper into
Yeah.
your human design.
Yes.
And so I was looking at we'll call them downfalls, right? The
Mm-hmm.
challenges that you have to work with. And it was so funny because it's like, you got to get out of your head and just
Mm-hmm.
remember that your body and your gut knows. And we are so conditioned to get away from that, right? We're so conditioned to look at our external environment as opposed to just interpreting what our body is actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
And can you imagine if everybody was taught their human design from like kindergarten or even, maybe a little bit beyond that developmental age, maybe they're like in their early teens and
Yeah.
they know like this is where you'll default and this is what you have to go towards. Can you imagine how different society would be, even if we talked about what emotions we're feeling in a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Like there is so much fucking power in having that, like that, just say that jaw tension comes up out of nowhere during your day. There is so much power in even just closing yourself in a bathroom, looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, I'm fucking angry. I am feeling so fucking angry in this moment. It's anger. This is anger. My
Mhm.
body's experiencing anger. And this is what I was talking about when I said you need to feel it to heal it. And this is what I noticed in private practice. And even in our students, we do volunteer programs. Like we do so much in regards to just feeling your emotions in your
Mhm.
body. And it never ceases to amaze me when I, even in one-on-one working with students, whatever it is, when I just pinpoint somebody in the eye and I was like, what do you want to say to your dad that you never said to
Mm.
them? Just say it right now. And they say it. And then it's like, it just, everything can relax in that moment.
Mhm.
And I think we're so afraid to just say it because we're so afraid of what people will judge us for, or we'll call it repercussions, what the repercussions will be. And if they'll be even worse than the pain that we're willing to hold on and just like hide. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, I know I mean, me and so many people, right? It's like we're taught as children, like that 0 to 7, that it's like we have to act a certain way to receive love. Right. So it's like if I express myself to like my mom or whoever it is, in your life that you have that trauma from, it's like, well, I'm not safe. I'm not worthy of love and so it's like we carry that into our adulthood. And like you said, with human design, it is such a beautiful thing because human design was literally like created and downloaded for children, right? It was to help us, like this generation, raise or I guess our generation would be the children of when it first started, right? But it's like, which is really cool to experience. But like, with my kids, like my son is 5. And so I found this system when he was like 2, right? So I've been raising him the last 3 years. And it's also so frustrating sometimes, right? Because like I am conditioned still, right? I'm still working to decondition myself, but like I really honor him and who he is. And I really try and just be like, hey, this is how you're feeling. Or like you said, with emotions, like the other day, he was like, I hate when you don't listen to me. And he like kicked the trash can. I was like, go to your room, right? But then I go in there afterwards and I'm like, listen, like, thank you for expressing yourself. Like, I'm glad that you were able to say that to me and felt safe to say that to me. But like, there's ways that we can go about it that maybe like not be destructive or, like just trying to find different tools. But I want him to know it's okay to feel, because it's so, I know from my, having not felt for 30 years, when I finally opened that door, it was like, I cried for years, like every day. Everything would set me off. And then it was just like, I don't even know how to like regulate myself. Right. And it was such a long journey of like finding those tools. So yeah, I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's like, nothing is wrong with our emotions. And I think we label them as wrong, like anger is wrong. And just like you said, for me, just being able to say, hey, I'm pissed off right now. It doesn't even have to be more than that. I don't have to blow up at you. I don't have to throw things at you. I don't have to get into a big blow up match. Just the fact that I can be like, I am so angry right now and leave it at that is freeing in itself. Cause then it's gone, it's out, right? I can move on.
Yeah, I
But
think I mean, and you can probably speak to this too. I think the number one reason why we can't get there anymore is because the safety of the space it's being removed and withheld. So as soon as, especially with anger, right? Because most
mm-hmm,
people are like, ooh, what are you gonna do? And if
mm-hmm,
we just had a container that was like, okay, go into this rage room, go into that scream room, like just get it out, and there's a safety container as opposed to withholding love, withholding connection if we have that anger in the first place. I think I mean, and I'm curious about what you think in the sense of, do you think that's why we withhold our emotions is because connection will be ripped away from us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think like in my personal history, in my relationships, I have been in abusive relationships, right? So like anger wasn't just anger, it was rage. And so like for me, feeling safe to express that anger, there was that level of like, I feel like it almost scared me because the only expression of anger I would see was to the extreme where it was violence, right? And so then it was like, am I expressing it if I'm not being violent? Or you know what I mean? Like it was that weird disconnect of like, if I'm angry, do I have to be violent? Or like not understanding how to just be angry. But yeah, I do. I think there is that connection element where it's like, if I tell you this then are you still going to love me? Because honestly, a lot of love is conditional. I don't
Really?
like, I would love to, I mean, we unconditionally love, like, if you're a parent or you're, like family, we unconditionally love them because we're still going to at the end of the day. But I do think even at that, sometimes I feel like it is very conditional, right? And we don't put those terms out there. Like I even said to my mom once, I was like, if there's conditions to you helping me with my kids, please let me know. And she got offended, but I was just kind of like, I need, and I know I have work to do with like communicating with them and everything like that, but there was just like, I felt like I needed to set those boundaries of like, if there's conditions, let me know ahead of time so I can make the decision if I want to get a sitter or if I want to ask you to help me.
Yeah,
But
totally. Expectations is everything, right? Like
mhm,
I know you use the word conditions. Sometimes I say expectations. Like just tell
mhm,
me the parameters so that I know where we're operating or where I'm probably going to get pissed if I don't know the information.
mhm,
And I find it really interesting that there's conditions not only on how we behave, but don't behave. And this is where I see so much trip up in regards to, say, like money or career is if I'm not in pain or if I'm not failing, will I still get belonging and connection? Because there's so much connection that happens in pain, right? And so if we actually let that go, if we let go of our rage, if we let go of our depression, if we let go of the anxiety, do we still get love? Do we still get connection? Or is that the only value that we need to actually hang on to our pain? Is because that anxiety means I'll get support, I'll get help immediately if I'm in that anxious state, or if I'm in that rageful state, somebody's going to come and be there with me. And so it's like, is that the only way that we benefit and value from our pain? And are we willing to actually let that go?
mhm.
I
And I
see
think
that.
that's why, yeah, like it's like you have to be willing to, I with clients or anything, like I really try and help people find that space within themselves. Like that has been my journey of coming to myself. And if I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, if this person's not going to love me because I said or expressed myself in this way, like, ooh, right. Like being able to come into myself and just be like, okay, if they don't accept me or if they do decide, they're done with me, that person wasn't meant to be in my life anyway. Right. But it's easy, but it's hard because nobody wants to like break those connections, especially when you love someone or have like deep feelings. But being able to center yourself and come back to yourself and know, like, trusting yourself is so huge. But like you said, I think a lot of people, maybe healing and coming to that space is hard because yes, if I'm anxious, I immediately get attention. Or if I'm, act this way, I will get attention from that. And those are things that are conditioned and learned throughout our life. So it's like so hard to break those patterns, and like people who are maybe like the sick child because they got attention from their parents when they had six other siblings, you don't, that's just the way that to receive love. So
Right?
yeah, it's like, how do you, it's just, I don't know, coming back to yourself and being willing to like feel that and see that. 'Cause awareness is key, right? I think it was like the Buddha who said like the man who knows he's crazy is no longer crazy, right? It's like once you see it, it loses its hold on you. So I don't know.
Yeah, she was one of my previous students and she had reached out and she was like, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" And I was like, "Yeah, always, no worries." And she said, "Okay, what question can I ask myself
Mm,
when I'm in a deep state of fear? Like, how do I know that my intuition is right?" And I was like, "Well, fear isn't intuition." Firstly,
yes.
like intuition and awareness is so grounded. It's a knowing. It's not changed by emotions. And I think that we as a society, just from everything I've observed, even experienced, we are operating often out of this like fight flight, right? We're making so many decisions that aren't grounded and aren't from, like you said, from within. And it
Mhm.
becomes this constant reminder for ourselves to always check in here first, to always, and when I say here, I mean like within you, always check in with your heart. Like, what is the pulse of the heart doing? And is it being muddled or influenced by, yeah, the fear from being bullied when you were in middle school or whatever? Or is it being muddled from that one moment when you spoke to that guy and he was like aggressive and abusive? Like, how do you distinguish between awareness and trauma, essentially?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And that is one of the biggest things that I think we really need to look at just from a societal perspective. That's like, hold on, my heart rate just raised. What choice am I actually making right now? Is it from safety or is it from this is what I truly desire?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge lesson for me in the beginning too, like learning what that intuition is. Because yeah, I think intuition is just very soft, very gentle, very loving, And I was even like in meditation maybe like a month ago, and I was like, is this anxiety or is this intuition? And it was just like in my head, it was like, if you feel anxious or fear in any way, this is not intuition, right? Like this is your ego, this is your mind, like just like grounded to that gentleness. But I wanted to ask you, so like, how did you like kind of like going on the back of everything we've been talking about, like you had mentioned in the beginning, like kind of when everyone's going right, you go left, right? Like, how do you, what has been your journey to be able to, have you always been like that? Also, do you have any Aquarius in your, in your astrology?
My sister's an Aquarius, but
okay.
I'm a pure Sagittarian. So
Okay.
I have a lot of fire, and I'll
Mhm.
usually march to the beat of my drum and then
Mm.
watch what happens
Yeah.
afterwards. And yeah, that's a really good question. So where I was at that point in my career, I was working in a Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting gym. So I was exposed to a lot of professional athletes at that time. And I thought, I just want to do sports acupuncture. Like I just wanted to be working on teams and professionals and whatever. Anyway, so it was funny because what I noticed is that, and this is the funny thing in regards to manual modalities, if they don't respond within like 4 treatments, there's something else going on. Like
Mm.
that is my like baseline. If you're not getting results in 4 sessions, it's either emotional or spiritual.
Mhm.
And so that's what I noticed starting to happen. And I'm working on these professionals that should be responding like immediately, and they weren't. And at that same time, my spouse lost her dad to suicide. And after that happened, she started to develop these migraines. And these migraines were so severe. And she had never had a headache in her life. And
Mm.
these migraines were so severe that for me as a practitioner, I'm like, I should be able to solve this. And I couldn't. And so I started looking at what else could possibly be out there. And when I started to discover that I could access these moments in time, I asked a simple question when one of those migraines came on to her. I was like, what happened? What happened when you were 12? And she tells me this story, and I link it to what's happening in present time. I ask her to repeat a few things after me. Boom, migraine's gone, interrupted completely. And I was like, holy shit.
Mm.
And so then I started to overlay that immediately afterwards. So when I'm looking at these professional athletes, like I'll never forget this one. She competes worldwide, and she's a power lifter, and she couldn't fully extend above her head. And when I was talking to her, I was like, well, this doesn't seem structural. Like, what's going on with you and your dad? And she tells me this story, and I was like, okay, work with me and say these after me and linking it together. And when I did that, the next day she messages me and she's like, dude, like, what did you do? Like, I have full overhead movement. I've lifted like 50 pounds more than I did just even yesterday. Like, what? And so it was like this moment of realization that you can bridge emotions, and once they're acknowledged in the body, like everything moves. And that was when really like everything took off for me, because then everybody was like, holy smokes, if you can help this person with their overhead extension, can you help my back pain? And if you can help my
Mm.
back pain, can you help my 10 years of like headaches and migraines? So that's kind of how it started to develop. It started with my spouse and me needing to solve a problem.
Mm.
and and then it kind of took off. So then I had, practitioners that had been twice my experience in my field being like, yo, here's some chronic clients that I don't know how to fix. Can you work on them? So I was way over on the other side. And that was where people started calling me the urban witch. Like
Mm.
I would have people bringing their kids to me being like, is this the witch? And I'm like, okay, okay. And I could see why, right? Because it was so different. Like not a lot of acupuncturists will talk about those sorts of things and ask you those sorts of questions, which I think is necessary. Same thing with massage and chiropractics, et cetera. Not a lot. There are some, but not a lot will ask you those questions and go there with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
When you were asking these questions about, like you said, with your spouse and being 12 years old, or with the athlete and asking about her dad, were those questions intuitive, or was there something that led you to those, like as you were going?
Yeah. So it's really interesting when you start using things like applied kinesiology. So you'll get to so herbal medicine. So there's a lot of different branches in Eastern medicine. So herbalism is one of them. And if you'll get some herbalists, they'll actually muscle test your body on what herbs are appropriate for you.
Mhm.
Do they do that in Ayurvedic as well?
I think we've touched on muscle testing. I'm not sure. I've like just started the herbalism class, so I'm not
Oh,
like
cool.
completely at the end of it yet, but yeah.
Awesome. I'm stoked for you. It's cool stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love it.
Right. And I'll never
Mhm.
forget he was a mentor, a teacher, and he would do that. He would test my muscle and hold herbs over my body. And I was like, this
Mm.
is like, what is this? Anyway, so that was just kind of in the periphery. And when you're taught that and you're taught to ask specific things to the body, you get answers, because your body will never, it doesn't have, like, your mind has a point of view, but your body just stores information.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can ask it just about anything. You can ask it from, you can muscle test the clothes you should be wearing. Oh, let me take that word out. You can muscle test your body, what it wants to wear. You can
Mm-hmm.
muscle test it, what it wants to eat, what it wants to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just overlaid that into, okay, well, how can I access deeper information of people? And I just systematically put it into this rubric, like, okay, step 1, this is what I'm going to do. Step 2, this is what I'm going to do. Step 3, okay, I'm going to test this, 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 and this. Step 4, I'm going to ask the person. And usually they're like, how the fuck did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
and that was where the system, like, so I teach subconscious imprinting. That's where the system really set into play, was when I systemized it.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain muscle testing for anybody who maybe doesn't know?
Yeah. Okay. So muscle testing is basically working with the body when the muscle has full strength versus not full strength. And so I usually talk about it in the form of the sway test. So if you've never seen a sway test before, just YouTube it and people will show you how to do it. And what ends up happening is your body will respond due to whatever type of memory it has in response to a moment, or in response to what really the body desires from an energetic perspective. So in short, the muscle will respond strong if that's what is going to help the body. It will respond weak if that is not what it wants. In the same regard as if you were to look at, say, like a kid, and you're trying to feed a kid pancakes and it's like, I don't want pancakes, like, it'll just retract, right? The kid won't really respond to you. Versus if you're like, do you want some strawberries? And it's like, yeah. So that's like this, that's like a nice visual, so you can see muscle testing in that respect. So when you're asking the body, it's kind of like asking a kid what it wants and what it lights up to. And your body will always give you accurate information based on the questions you're asking it,
Mm-hmm.
especially if there's no like judgment or point of view attached to it. That kind of
Yeah.
skews it, but yeah.
Cool. Going back to like the athletes, what, like, did you ever find any sort of resistance with them in dealing with emotions? Like when you were going through that?
I did at first. It's kind of like one of those moments where like people don't believe you until they experience it, and then they're
Mm-hmm.
like a firm believer. Like, I'll never forget one guy. He was a trainer. He was an athlete. Like, he checked off like everything from athletics perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and he was suffering from a shoulder issue. And I had done acupuncture, and it didn't respond. Same thing, the way that it normally would respond to. And I remember saying to him, this is emotional. Like, this is 100% emotional. And he's like, I don't know. And I said, here. And I was in the middle of the gym standing with like people all around us. And I said, there's 2 moments in your life that you know that you can't stop thinking about. And he just kind of looked at me, and we just right in that moment, he was like, what is this chick talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, think about this moment. And he thought about it, and I was like, nope. And we didn't even talk about what the moment was. I said, just think about this one. And I said, that's not the one. What about this one? And I said, that's the one. And he looked at me like, what the hell? Who is this chick? And the next day, we never talked about anything that would have happened. The next day he comes back around and he said, you know what? I thought about that moment. And I know you don't know what that moment was. He's like, but I knew what it was. And he's like, I really sat with that moment. And he's like, my shoulder doesn't hurt today.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's the power of it. And once that happened and the belief in me changed, and I was like, okay, if I can do that with him, then there's no question about anything. And as soon as I sat with that, I never had a problem with people being like, does that really work? And it was just automatic that everything shifted after that.
Mm-hmm. I literally got goosebumps. That is so powerful. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Because it's, yeah, I think like we talked about, it's just like having that awareness and having that, I don't know, confronting ourselves that we don't, so, we don't want to see it so often, but yeah.
It's really, it's interesting because people would even come and be like, yeah, but I've had this for like, there's one girl, she had migraines, like literally from as far as she can remember. She was in her late 20s. And I was like, it's emotional. And she's like, no, it's not. I'm like, you've seen every fucking doctor under the sun. Like, we have to address this. And it's that moment where you just give a tiny little opening to someone to be like, there is another possibility that you've never been introduced to. And as soon as you initiate a tiny shred of hope is what changes everything. You give that tiny shred of hope and people's entire world will open up after that.
Yeah. I studied gut and holistic health, and I just find it so fascinating, that connection, because even sometimes, there are times when we do feel emotion, right? And we're attaching them to, like, we wake up in a bad mood or whatever. And we're like, oh, I'm so mad at this person, or this person did this. And it's like, sometimes it's just because we ate like shit the night before. Sometimes it's just because we drank too heavily. Right. And cause like, alcohol, like 2 days later, we'll feel the emotional, effects of alcohol, and we don't put it together because it's not like immediately after, right? It's like removed from it. And so I just find it so fascinating that, yes, like we store these emotions are very real, but sometimes it's also just what we're ingesting. Right. And we attach so many meanings to it. So it's like this twofold thing. And I just think it's so interesting to like be able to like see that and heal that. And, I always ask myself now when I'm emotional, like, the first thing I do is I have like a mental checklist that I go through. It's like, all right, what did I eat? Did I eat something that I shouldn't, or again, shouldn't, that word, like, did I eat something my body did not want? Right. Did I drink when my body did not want to? I go through it. Did I drink enough water? Did I whatever? And then if it's like, if I've gotten to the bottom of that and I've done all the things, then it's like, okay, and now how can what is this? Right. And then I can kind of like sit and come into it. And it's like, do I need to move my body? Like, what do I need to give myself? And how do I need to like move through this? But it's taken so long to get there, and just like learning all these different tools. And I just think what you do is so beautiful. And just how many sessions does it typically take somebody to have these, like these breakthroughs, and to be able to like really move past? I mean, is it immediately one session, 2 sessions? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's really dependent. However, the most consistency that I've seen is within 4 sessions. Like usually you'll have a dramatic reduction in whatever you're struggling with, if you want to heal it. Like I said, we were talking about, like, are you benefiting from your pain or whatever's going on, or is there value in it? If you can get around that and let go of the value, you'll see changes within 1 to 4, hands down, hands down. I did want to speak to that though, because when you're talking about something like, well, did I just like eat something? And is that what's messing with my body? I mean, really, that's the number one thing, is like, if you know your body and you're still feeding it things that it's like, yo, I don't want this. Of course, it's not going to be happy with you. Like, there's 2 different intelligences that are operating in one area. And it's the same thing. Like, I use food a lot when I describe how we feel to people. And it's in the sense of like, if you always feel nauseous going to see your mom, what if you actually removed yourself from what you're like, quote unquote, allergic to in this moment, and you work on that allergy of whatever it is between you and your mom, and just give yourself some distance to heal before you reintroduce that back to yourself. Just in the same way where people are like, oh, I have an allergy to like bread. I'm like, okay, maybe if you like do an elimination of it for 30 days, is that actually going to reduce your symptomology if you reintroduce it? And even that conversation also changes people's even faster, I would say, because giving them that awareness. So if it's like, okay, I've got anxiety, and I always have anxiety when I go to family dinners, I'm like, okay, great. Let's remove the belief as to why the anxiety is there in the first place. Maybe just avoid family dinners for 2 weeks and tell me what happens afterwards. And it's like, most people are like, my entire life has completely changed when I just stopped walking towards my triggers and like took a pause, resolved it, and then now the trigger is completely gone. Yeah, it's immediate. Even if you just feel it for a second, it's immediate.
Yeah. I mean, this is like going on a whole, I mean, I could talk all day about like, like when you talk about food but I think like part of the problem too, in like North America specifically, is like the food that we are ingesting, like just keeps us so disconnected from ourselves, right? Like you said, like it's so hard to like get in touch with yourself when you just like don't feel good, whether it is from emotions or just from like eating too much processed food and sugar and things like that, because it's like you said, that elimination diet, whether it's actual food or people or places or things, right? It's like when you take that out and you actually can think like, holy shit, like I shouldn't feel headaches every single day. I shouldn't feel bloated every single day. Like that doesn't have to be my reality. And it's like, it's so easy in theory, but it really is hard to put into place because like we're so addicted to all of these things for all these various reasons, whether it is just because we eat too much sugar and, maybe childhood sugar was the thing we did with our grandma, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so many layers to it. And I just think like, it's like, I don't know. It's like I said, it's easy, but it's hard. It's like the thing that I relate to food a lot because we can control it, right? Like we can actually control it. We can go in and be like, okay, well, maybe I'll replace this with like fruit instead of eating the cookies, or just having these little things, and like maybe like one cheat day, because we don't want to be like so structured and not enjoying life and all those things. I'm a Taurus sun, so I'm all about like good tasting food. Like I don't want to feel deprived. But I think there's a way that you can do it. And yeah, I don't know. I just, that's where I feel like one of my tools with emotions is just like, if we can eliminate the food that's making us sick, and then we can actually really look at like beneath it, what the emotion is telling us, aside from like all these added layers that are masking it, that we can't actually tap into it because we don't feel good, you know?
Or
So,
we're filling ourselves because we don't. It's so fascinating, when you start playing with food and removing things and what happens to a person. We experience withdrawal in so many different ways. And food is one of the easiest, I think, to look at. Like I remember the first time I tried a 28-day medical medium. Do you know
mhm,
who Anthony Williams? Yeah, okay. So it was the first time I tried
mhm,
that. It was like by week 3, I was like, what is all this emotion? I
mhm,
removed coffee, I removed bread, like basically all the things that you just love and delight. And then
mhm,
you really have to face what is now actually coming out of my tissue that I wasn't willing to really sit with, that now I'm forced to, because I can't cope. I can't cope with trying to comfort myself with this kind of food. If you're willing to like do that, it'll teach you, like you said, so much about yourself. And in that same respect, like food affects us on a chemical level.
mhm,
So yeah, of course you're going to feel crazy headaches when you take coffee out. If you've been drinking coffee 3 times a day for like a year, like
mhm,
your body needs that so much time to process. Absolutely. We're so good. I think when you like open up to that whole new consciousness, then it's sometimes it can be hard not to mind fuck yourself, to be like, is the food? Is it my clothes? Is it my environment? Is it this person? Like, you're just like, what is it? And you just got to like take a moment, same thing, to come back inward, to be like, okay, let's just hold on a titty second here and just be
mhm.
like, what is actually going on? Like, what are the facts of what I have done, like you said, in the last 24 hours that could be contributing to the way that I feel today? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes it's like we have to like go through that pain to like come to the other side, and we just don't want to do it, you know? I mean, yoga talks about it, right? It's like selfishness and selflessness, just in the fact of like sometimes we have to go through like an act or an emotion may not feel good in the moment, right? But it's going to get us to a place of peace. Like sometimes we have to suffer and go through the pain to find the peace. So it's like when we take action and things like that. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's fascinating. I just like there, like I said, there's so
Yeah.
many layers to it, and it's just, that's why I love like, having this space too. It's like being able to bring all these different tools to people, because like I'm just like, I trial and error everything, right? Like I'm so down to just like anything that's going to help me heal or help someone else heal. And like in human design, I'm a 6-3 profile, right? So it's just like this is like what I'm here to do, is just to like try things and just be like, this will work, and try this. And if it doesn't work, leave it, and so just like love having those conversations. I do want to go back to, you talked about subconscious imprinting. And so I would love you to like expand on that a little bit, because I know like I think it's like 80% of like our day is run by our subconscious. So it's like, as we're talking about, like, how do you heal or change your subconscious when it's just literally on autopilot?
Right. That is the question.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So subconscious imprinting, that birthed from my spouse's migraines after the suicide of her dad. And so basically what it is in a short form is you're accessing moments, memories, environments. You're accessing these moments in your consciousness, present day time, but you're going back to those and you're resolving what was never felt in the moment. And so what it can do is it can take, so we'll take your jaw pain, for example, or tension when it comes up.
Mm-hmm.
What sit does is it takes that moment where you're like, I just have this frustrating jaw pain that or tension that it won't go away. And I'll be like, okay, we're going to take that. I'm going to ask you what you actually want to feel. So if you were like, I want freedom in my jaw and I want freedom to express myself, I'd be like, okay, so we have where you are and where you want to go. Because you always need to know where you're going. Otherwise, you have no data to actually understand if you've
Mm-hmm.
resolved it or not. Anyway, so we gather that. And within the sit model, you can access so much information about where that moment in time was, whether that was one specific thing that somebody could have said to you when you were 10 years old and you were on the playground and they said, I don't know, what you're saying is stupid, or your singing voice is terrible, Rochelle.
Mhm.
You should never sing. Like that moment in time locks into your body. And by using sit, you're accessing the moment, just the straight data. And then by allowing a person to even lay down, if you're in a laying down position, Joe Dispenza talks about this. As soon as you go to lay down, your body's like, oh, we're going to sleep. I remember this. Your brain waves immediately start to shift. And when
Mhm.
your brain waves start to shift and you move out of your conscious mind, you have access to change anything in your world, anything in your body, any belief system, any preconceived notion, anything past life. You start to shift all of that. And then with sit, what we do with our practitioners is we have very, very specific statements that unlock that subconscious root and the belief that's attached to it. So the belief of, I can never actually say what I want to say. People won't listen, or people are going to bully me, or I'm never going to be received. You shake that loose with very specific statements, and then you replug in what people actually desire. It's
Mhm.
literally like taking an app on your phone and deleting it and removing it and putting a different one on that you actually desire.
Mhm.
And from there, that is where people, they face their integration moment, where maybe you're back on a playground and you're just singing like, I believe I can fly, whatever it is, and nobody says shit about you. It's that, those are those moments. So that's how sit works. It's like we take out the old and we plug in the new, and it's very immediate.
I love that. Yeah. I think obviously our mind is so powerful, right? And through like some inner child work that I've done and in meditations that I've done. And you mentioned like laying down, and I immediately was like taken to that place. Like I just put a little like pillow under my leg, and I feel so safe and like in that space. And it just, like you said, allows you to like open yourself up to that. And then using your mind to just like recreate these situations. It's like, it's wild. It's wild how powerful it is, you know? And you also talked about, oh, sorry, continue.
No, I
You're
was
gonna
going
say
to
something?
say, like, when you say it's wild, these moments, like, I think the number one thing that really messes with our bodies and our human experience is we'll continuously recycle a memory. When
Mhm.
you recycle a memory, you're just constantly feeling that same moment over and over and
Mhm.
over again. And so if you can pluck that out and allow something else to exist in there that you actually want in there, that will change the whole, like the entire physiology of a body. There's studies all over the place that talk about how quickly you can diffuse rage and anger by using like forgiveness, for example. Like
Mm.
it's nuts. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even in those moments where like I reprogram these situations that have happened to me, or I give my inner child the thing that she needed at the time, it's like the actual physical release, like mentally and physically, that I feel after those moments. It's powerful. Like it really does work, being able to put us in those states to like truly heal these things, even though, yeah, we're not actually rewriting the actual physical situation. But then also, I mean, just from a quantum physics perspective, like maybe we are, right? Everything's happening now. There's so many layers to our reality, and so many vibrational layers and energetic. I mean, it's just the
Oh my gosh.
possibilities.
Yeah.
Like we are so incredibly powerful as human beings, as souls. And it's like so many of us just walk around and think like this physical shell is all we have,
Mm.
and it's just like the more I open myself up to like what actually is and like tap into what actually is, it's so beautiful, and it's so incredibly powerful. And one question I had for you, because you had mentioned past lives, so
Yeah.
like as you're doing this work, how do you know that maybe an emotional trauma that somebody is holding is maybe from like a past life or ancestral trauma, or this life, and how do you go through and heal something that has not happened in this physical life right now?
Yeah. I'll differentiate past life for an individual versus ancestral, because to me, they can be intertwined, but they're actually also different as well.
Hmm.
So usually when I see past life things happening, you'll know likely that there is a different lifetime that's moving inside yours when, say, you see somebody and you're like, oh, I feel like I've known them forever. It's almost like a soul connection. And I think if you can for a moment just drop the idea and the judgment that our soul can't live on, if you just drop that for a second and you start to invite the idea that maybe our soul is eternal, right? And maybe it will last forever. If you can just sit with that for a second, you can start to think of these moments in your life where it's like, well, I've always just known how to do this. You've got prodigies that are musicians or woodworkers or teachers, whatever. It's almost like they've been doing it forever. These are moments where things extend beyond this lifetime. when it comes into symptomology, if someone has been experiencing something their entire life, and you'll hear someone, they're like, I've had anxiety, like I can't even remember what it was like not to have anxiety. I'm like, instantly, this is very likely past life, unless there's somebody else in your family in this present time, and you're close to you, perhaps, that also experienced that same degree of it. Now, I'll talk about that in a second, but we'll go back to past life. The other thing that you can experience that almost always is going to be linked to a past life is phobias. Unless you've been exposed to something in this life and you just like have like a PTSD straight response to it. But if it's something you've always been scared of, most people, it's spiders, water that you can't see the bottom is a pretty common one, and fire. Those are really common phobias that people have. And for me, like, you do a past life session, you will immediately see why you're afraid of it, for sure, without a doubt. I remember even myself, I was always afraid of the dark, always afraid of the dark. And then when I started exploring past life work, like, I don't have an issue walking. I live in a rainforest. There's no light pollution here. So there's no issue now with darkness. And so these things can change. So it's usually that. Addiction is another one that I have seen oftentimes linked to past life issues as well, where something wasn't completed in a past life, or it was so intensely emotional and maybe you died right after it that you carried it here to try and resolve it. It's like you're always trying to resolve it. So that's from like a past life perspective. Even money, actually, money is a really fun one, but that might be a whole hour conversation in regards to that one. In regards to ancestral or generational, that's really cool in the sense of, I'll use an extreme example. So women down an entire family line with infertility, unexplained, especially infertility. You will see that traveling backwards and backwards and backwards. There's always going to be a generation where that was initiated, whether someone's perhaps child was taken away, somebody died unexpectedly, whatever the traumatic incident was, it'll continue. Same as a past life. It'll continue to pass onwards and onwards until there is someone within that generation that is willing to feel it, to heal it. And that's usually where you implore something like constellation work. And constellation work often used like surrogate or by proxy healing. So you can access that information and heal it. Other ways that you can see ancestrally, though, is also behavior. Like maybe you have women and an entire family line and they just choose a partner that is heavily abusive. Like, yes, part of that is learned. And also it's part of this, it's almost like it's woven directly into the genetics until it is accessed and resolved, whatever interpersonal conflict was within that family. Yeah. But that's where you start seeing all sorts of crazy things. Like I've even done generational healing on, like, and forgive me for being explicit, but I've done generational healing on something even as simple and uncomfortable as like a yeast overgrowth or candida, and having it resolve by working on somebody 3 generations back, like who clearly isn't alive anymore.
Yeah. You do the healing on the person 3 generations back?
Yes.
And what does that look like?
So that's called surrogate work or by proxy work. In that specific instance, I did what's called a sit constellation. Most people are probably familiar with family constellations, which was derived by Bert Hellinger. I do a different adaptation from that just because of my work in my field. And basically you work by proxy on family members. So if I work on by proxy, I could work on your mom, I could work on your grandmother straight by working through you, or by working on somebody you don't even know. And so you can access that information and resolve it. Same thing by overlaying like a sit system on top of it to bring resolution to the very thing that we're talking about, emotions that were never truly felt.
Yeah. What is like the wildest, just the healing that you facilitated? Like if there's anything that stands out in your mind of just like, wow, that just
wildest,
I would love to know, or just most powerful, wildest, whatever terminology you want to use, but yeah, just like something that just like comes to you that was just incredibly powerful.
I mean, I've got a couple. The one that pops to mind was, okay, so she was a woman who, she was in her mid 30s and she always had problems with food. It was like all she could eat was 2 different meals and could never deviate from it, had 0 interest in cooking. Like food was just really, it was really difficult for her, honestly, to connect with it. And so she was like, I really want to heal this. Like, I want to be someone who cooks my meals, etc. So I was like, okay, fine. And when I was doing the session on her, it it transitioned from present time, which was like working on, I don't know, childhood stuff from like when she was 5. So we're talking about food at that point, but it actually transitioned completely, like almost instantaneously, into a past life. And I'll never forget this moment where I'm with her in person and her body started convulsing, just shaking. And I was asking her, what is going on? And she was like, I'm in the war. I am a German soldier. And then at that point she went really quiet, and I was like, what is going on? And she's shaking more and more. And she's like, it's so cold and I can't say the words. And I was like, it's okay. Like, you're safe. Like, let's keep going. And she was able to describe to me, in being inside of a concentration camp. And she was a German soldier dictating what was happening within this camp. And the way that she was able to, like, graphically in detail describe to me how she was in control of the food, and who got food and who didn't get food, and who got to eat and who didn't get to eat. And the way that she was describing this, and the way that she described her relationship with food just in her present life, it was shocking, because as we acknowledged that, and it was like, just as quick and intensely as all of that shaking came on and the inability for her to speak, it just all stopped. And she was like, we're done. We're out of this life. And I was like, what? That was it? We're done? And she's like, yeah. And so what ended up happening after that, we didn't talk for like one week about food. And then it was like the second week. And then the third week, she got the instant pot. Is that what they're called? The pressure cooker. She got one of those. And I have never seen somebody make such elaborate meals, going from just cooking like rice and chicken to like elaborate meals that she would have. And she even went on, now, this is a year later, she now has like a stand-up freezer where she'll meal prep all of these elaborate meals and like color code them. It was night and day from that moment. And it was all starting from what started from, like age 5, and how she was cared for all the way into this past life to come back full circle. Like when I look at that, I'm like, this seems surreal. Like, what the fuck just happened? But then at the same time, she never had an issue with food ever again after that moment, from experiencing this really traumatic past life. So like, that's one. There's more. I've seen like unexplained infertility resolved, which, whoa, that to me is just bonkers. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Like, to be able to heal something like that, it's like that was her lesson in this life, right? I would imagine, is just to heal that. It was almost like she was punishing herself for that past life, right? Like, that is incredible. Sometimes it blows my mind, like how like interconnected, and how just, I don't know, just how like powerful it all is, and just, I don't know. It's just
when you talk about interconnectedness. Okay. So I had done a live, so I'll do group healings every month. And just because I want to access more people, to help more people. And I had done a past life one. I had never done a group, like worldwide past life one before. And I was like, okay, we'll see what happens. And the wild thing about the interconnectedness is, so many people were either in ancient Greece, like where they were like, no, I had this, and this. All of them were saying ancient Greece, and this is what was happening. Or the other half of the group was like, I found my one true love, and they like, something happened and I died and I couldn't have them anymore. And there was so much grief. And I was like, what are the chances that these are literally the two themes? Like the way that people were, it was nuts. It blows my mind constantly, the way that we are connected.
Yeah. And just divinely guided. Like, all those people that showed up were meant to show up for that specific healing that you were providing to them. Like, I don't question anything anymore. I'm like, there is no like, it's not coincidental, right? Like, we are all like divinely led to exactly what we're meant to be led to. You know what I mean? Like 100%. Like, I believe so strongly in that. So I'm like, I don't know. It's just so beautiful. It's, I don't know. I don't even like have the words. It's absolutely beautiful.
Totally. Like, I think if we're willing to slow down for a second and just observe what's going on, like, even so, right now we live on the coast, so we're right by the ocean. And we were walking past a graveyard of all things. And we see this animal streaking across like full speed, like very fast. And I thought it was a dog. And it turns out it was a sea otter. And I'm like, what are the chances I would see a sea otter running across a graveyard outside of the water. Like, it was such an absurd, you know, it's moments like that where you really are invited to stop and pay attention, to be like,
Mhm.
okay, what are the chances that I'm right here observing this with this? Like, what is it? What am I being told in this moment? And if
Yeah.
I just, like, you know, those moments, and that happens in every situation. If we can just slow down and have an experience with what we're doing, like, what is it actually telling us?
Yeah, I believe source is always giving us signs and messages,
Yeah.
and it's a matter of like getting out of here and just like accepting it and allowing it and like being with it. It's just, yeah, it's so powerful. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people work with you? So you do things digitally, like online, right? And in person. So if anybody is listening here and would, wants to book a session with you or learn from you, what services do you provide?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few things. You can work one-on-one with me. You can go to empoweredhealersacademy.com/VanOhm. Like, that's my like direct page. You can also learn how to do sit. And a lot of people have just jumped like career changes, like insurance brokers, whether you're a healer or not. You can kind of go and you can go check out the program. And we teach that in a very condensed intensive so that you can learn that as well. So that's another way to work with me. And that's at empoweredhealersacademy.com. Those are the two main ways. And then within that system is where we're constantly either saying, hey, we're doing like a live healing, or we're doing a retreat, whatever it may be. That's where you can access basically all the info. Otherwise, you can find us on Instagram too at Empowered Healers.
Okay. I will link everything below. And I know you had a gift for the audience if you want to just let them know what that is. And I'll have that linked as well.
Yeah. So one of the number one questions when someome's exposed to sit and they try it for the first time, they're like, okay, what is this? And so we developed what's called a masterclass. So it's an extended period of time where we basically tell you all the ins and outs of what it is and how it works and what you need to know about emotions, really, and how to decipher whether it's physical or emotional for somebody. And so we've included that in a video, and you can find that at empoweredhealersacademy.com/masterclass. Like, there is so much information within that your life could change just by watching that, I would say.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me and the audience. And I think this is such a powerful conversation. I can't wait for them to like dig into like what you have to offer and all this healing work and just these tools and modalities. It is so beautiful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so
Of
much, Rochelle.
course.